Welcome, everybody. I'm Jonathan Gustin. I'm the founder and lead teacher of Purpose Guides Institute. And what we do is we help people find that place where their deepest gladness and joy and the world's hunger meets. That's a quote from Frederick Buechner. And what we do is we help people take the descent, burrow down into their depths, discover their life's purpose, and then offer it as a gift of service to life. So if you're interested in what we're up to, you can go to purposeguides.org. And we also train people to acquire the skill set of helping others find their purpose. But today is the Purpose Summit, and I would like to introduce our very special guest speaker, Rick. Welcome. So Rick Hanson, PhD, is a neuropsychologist and author of Hardwiring Happiness, The New Brain Science of Contentment, Calm, and Confidence. He also wrote Buddha's Brain, The Practical Neuroscience of Happiness, Love, and Wisdom. And he wrote Just One Thing, Developing a Buddha Brain One Simple Practice at a Time. He's the founder of Wellspring Institute for Neuroscience and Contemplative Wisdom, an affiliate of the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley. He's been an invited speaker at Oxford, Stanford, and Harvard, and taught in meditation centers worldwide. He's an authority on self-directed neuroplasticity. Dr. Hanson's work has been featured in a variety of places: the BBC, NPR, CBS, US News and World Report, and O Magazine. And his articles have appeared widely in Tricycle, Insight Journal. And he has several audio programs with Sounds True. And he edits the Wise Brain Bulletin and his weekly e-newsletter, Just One Thing. I'm a subscriber, and I highly suggest you subscribe. So warm welcome to you. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with us.
Jonathan, it's a pleasure. Greetings to everyone listening or watching.
Wonderful. Well, let's just get right down to it. So this is the Purpose Summit, and everyone has a different sort of take on the word purpose. So where does this word live in you, if it does at all? Where does this word live and land in you, a person's life purpose or soul purpose?
I was reflecting on that question, and it's a haunting question, first of all. And it's one that's extremely rich and deep. We could spend the next hour just almost even defining a question. And we're exploring different ways of approaching it. So a couple of early notions about this. One is to regard the will as most fundamentally a giving over to the best in yourself. So in this way of framing purpose, I think of it, or I experience it, that's a better way to put it, as a giving over to and a willingness to be lived by and carried along by and lived through by something profound, intimate, authentic to yourself, and ultimately, in my own view, transpersonal. Minimally inside the natural frame, and we're going to define the edges of this frame, I'm sure, and perhaps involving something supernatural or transcendental that's, by definition, distinct in some meaningful way from the ordinary natural frame of a college physics textbook, which still includes a lot of wild and crazy stuff. I guess that's one way into it. Another way I have into it is to regard the psyche in a Jungian or neo-Jungian sense, and also in a Jung had no monopoly on this view. You could say in a more mythopoetic sense, a more archetypal, and also think of the shamanistic wisdom streams in the world. Anyway, the psyche is layered as having depths, having subpersonalities, having inner conflict, and having, as Jung described, imagery or archetypes that are, I think this is a quotation, are the images of the instincts, the deep primal currents that are embedded in our own biology, and perhaps, again, reaching beyond our own biology to something outside the natural frame. So point being that to feel that there are literally depths in the psyche that we often don't plumb, we're not in touch with, They tend to be nonverbal. They tend to feel ancient and primal and imagistic, potent, even numinous. And those are real. I was a longtime psychologist and also someone who's worked with a lot of depth and dreams and things of that sort. I can attest to that. As a neuropsychologist, I think a lot about the 600 million year history of the evolution of the nervous system and everything embedded from the shoulders up in the brain, and not to equate the brain with something like Spock or headiness, but just appreciating that that's the location of the organ that's doing the most to constrain, construct, and condition and create each moment of phenomenology, each moment of our own experiencing. So thinking about the inner lizard, mouse, and monkey, in a sense, reptilian brainstem, mammalian subcortex, primate human cortex, inside us all, it's a zoo in there. It's a menagerie. And to me, there's something, I'll finish on this notion, that is like parallel process. It's an analog to the saying that I've reflected a lot on lately, going back to my roots in the 60s and 70s. The personal is the political. The political is the personal. In other words, as we turn inward to our own ecology, Gregory Bateson's notions and ecology of mind, as we turn inward to the zoo, the menagerie, the voices, the village, the committee, pick your metaphor. It's Game of Thrones inside there some days. Just all that, your internal kingdom, queendom. As you become more whole and integrative internally, you relate to all those parts, and you, in the saying, differentiate first in order to integrate. As you do that internally with yourself, and you come more and more to peace, you come to peace with all that, and inclusive and balanced, and you start seeing the common nature of all those internal phenomena. Even though they differ in their content, they're the same in their nature as experiences or aspects of experience. So as you do that internally, it's interesting, you also come more to peace with the external ecosystem, the ecosystem of society, diversity, culture. You feel more embedded in nature and life altogether. It's kind of a two-way process that works together in a positive cycle. As you become more at peace with diversity externally, you're more capable to be at peace with diversity internally, and vice versa. And that's definitely been my experience directly, and also my observation of other people.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. So many threads there. I mean, one being that sort of the internal purpose or unique purpose of an individual, and the world soul and the world purpose. These not only commingle, but they're really sort of expressions of the same thing in some sense.
Yeah, that word soul. I think sometimes about how
please.
The trickiest words often have just one syllable. So, God. Mind, soul, love, hate, fear. And for my sake, Jonathan, maybe for the sake of others, could you let me know how you're using that word soul?
Sure. Soul, and this is following the Sufi tradition, soul as an organ of perception, that it's not just an intellectual thing, that there is an imaginal world. And the imaginal world is real, like the dream world, right? And we can ignore it or minimize it and say it's just, neurological brain farts. Or we can say, actually, this is a dimension of reality that is worth exploring. So soul is perception, soul as the imaginal realm itself, and then also soul as place. Like, what is our niche? Or what is our niche in the habitat of life? So when we occupy soul, we occupy our place, the place that we were meant to sort of root in. So that's a little bit of what I feel about soul.
I relate to it. So different ways I hear people using that word. So just flagging it in an ordinary sense, which has in America, some roots even in African American culture. Just the notion of people who have soul. There's a deep soul. There's an authenticity, groundedness, no bull, soul. Someone you can count on. You lean against that person and there's a there there.
Yeah.
That part. Then second, I think of the Thomas More kind of take on soul, sort of a neo-Jungian, which resonates or at least overlaps a lot with some of the way you were describing it, as a sense of the depth of your own psyche that feels, it's interesting. Jung had a take on that. He said, I think it was something on the order of, it's a close paraphrase, the soul is that subject for which the ego is an object.
Yeah. Oh, that Jung.
Yeah, that deep, and I get that deep knowingness, that deep perspective. It feels, for me, deeper than personality, even deeper than, it feels deeper than gender. Just it's profound. And then the way soul's used as something that has to do, that's outside the natural frame, including the notion of something that migrates from body to body in a reincarnated sense or partakes in other realms. I would say I'm a legitimate expert on this point, the mind and the nervous system. I claim no special expertise about the supernatural or transcendental. I've simply tried to think about it pretty clearly, because I think people get into, they lose sight of the magnificence of the supernatural and the transcendental when they conflate it unnecessarily or sentimentalize it unnecessarily in ways that actually boil down to natural processes. So I think it's important to.
Yeah, beautiful. Well,
I'm comfortable with wherever we go. I just want to.
Yeah. No, fantastic.
Well, I just want a glossary, man.
Absolutely. All right. So let me make a different distinction. So here's a map that it's not true, of course, because it's a map. It's reductionistic, but it's helpful. So, you and I share an interest in Buddhism and meditation. And so in this map, we have what's sort of sometimes the transcendent or upper world dimension of quote unquote enlightenment, unbounded, non-dual awareness, whatever that means.
Yeah.
Spirit. And then we have our everyday personality and ego. We know what an ego is. It's ego. And we could define that too if we want.
Yeah.
But there's another journey that feels, it has the perfume or scent of spiritual, of transcendent, but rather than an up and out to unitive intimacy, to, it's a burrowing down where we find out how we are unique, but not so much in an ego level. Almost it feels like a destiny, like a Michael Meade, like a mythology, or James Hillman. Like there's the acorn theory, like there's something inside of us that is, the entelechy, as Aristotle said, our full fruition. So so maybe, as a meditation teacher and as a Buddhist teacher, is there a distinction that you care to make or help us understand the difference between the classical enlightenment per se, and then finding our uniqueness, but at a depth level, if you will, a soul level?
This is a subject that I've reflected on a lot, and it is very alive for me. And again, the point of what we're doing just right at the front end here is not around semantic hair splitting, but really just sort of getting on the same ground with each other.
Yeah.
And so here, to me, we're talking about a sense of calling. Again, I think that's very much in that kind of more care of the soul approach. You're caring for the soul, but a lot of what you're doing is clearing it away. I think about Michelangelo's description of how he sculpted the David statue, which, if you've ever seen it, and I had the privilege of being able to see it in Florence one time, it is really quite shocking. And I'm not super appreciative of art, so when I'm blown away by art, it's really something special. And he just described it as chipping everything away that was not David. So there's something about that. So chipping everything away that's not your calling, so that your calling fully lives you. And then it is interesting. It does feel like there is something individual in that calling, and there is a sense of mission almost. It's really interesting for me as someone trained and I'm in love with Buddhism. That's a better way to put it, even, especially the deep original teachings of the Buddha. I have a yellow flag horizon sign around the slippery slope of starting to privilege or essentialize, entityize that sense that's very real to us. There is a very real sense in me of a kind of calling of something beautiful and precious and special to be protected and to be allowed to live out in this particular life, in these circumstances and conditions. On the other hand, there's something in me that is, I would say, just careful, if not dubious, about making it special, but maybe it is special, on the other hand. So I kind of go back and forth about that.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn off my phone here, which is starting to buzz away. Go away, little phone. Anyway.
You used an interesting word that is near and dear to my heart, but many people won't be familiar with it, mythopoetic. So maybe you could first describe what that means, and do you yourself feel there's a kind of a mythic narrative or mythopoetic identity that helps sort of, not helps, but in fact animates your life, a narrative that's sort of, well, soul level, if you will. But first, what mythopoetic means.
As a non-specialist there, I think that is quite rooted in Hillman's neo-Jungian work and also the men's movement. Some of that came up, and gosh, I'm blanking on his name. It'll come to me in a moment. I think he wrote Iron John.
Robert Bly.
There we are. So bows in that direction. That's their turf a lot. I think of it as a nice way of describing the importance of imagery and archetypal experience and imagination. I liked how you described soul. I'll just close this. I'm getting, the garbage truck is on. Speaking of soul, you got to take out the garbage, right? So anyway, so it's about appreciating imagination and drawing on classic imagery like the tree of wisdom, or the wise man, the wise woman, the burning bush, the hero's journey.
Yeah.
The common themes you find as Joseph Campbell did, in so many traditions around the world that are really disparate. And I think to bring it down to earth, it's also a response to our culture, our modern culture. I mean, we tend to live these days in ways that are fairly sterile. Flat surfaces, we interface with machines, images. Those tend to, it's not that so much that they're bad, although they can be bad if they're overused, but they tend to crowd out everything else. I think about relationships on Facebook, a mile wide and an inch deep. Right?
Well put.
And so the idea of just giving over to what's nonverbal and what feels not amenable to technological control and domination that so characterizes modern culture. And there's something slow and weighty and boom, boom, like the Ents, I guess, in Lord of the Rings, boom. It's so different from that pace of so many people these days.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I think that speaks to mythopoetic.
Great. And so personalizing it, so your sense of purpose, is there an image or a symbol or a mythopoetic narrative or identity that you feel animates you? You know, for instance, in my work, you know, if I had a business card, it could say meditation teacher, purpose guide, psychotherapist. But that's not my mythopoetic identity. Those are delivery vehicles for my mythopoetic work. For me, is to be a whole person midwife, to midwife wholeness, wherever I am, in myself, and attempting to do so for the people who come to me. I'm wondering, in your work, not that you put it on your business card, is there a sense of like a myth or a narrative, a mythopoetic, lyrical image or something that kind of feels like you are responsible to it or a steward to it?
it's many things. So one thing about it is mystery and wonder. Another aspect is the possibility of reincarnation. I'm very able, for those who want, to function professionally entirely inside the natural frame. And we're speaking here of certain aspects of this that do start having a feeling that something's involved meaningfully, causally. Something is causally involved that transcends an individual life. I acknowledge that our experience of that could be entirely constructed within the natural frame and does not in and of itself prove that there is something transcendental or supernatural, blah, blah. That said, and there is a sense of that. And I think in this life, well, I'll be quite personal here. I had a funny epiphany some years ago as I was driving to work. And it was often these epiphanies are, they happen in very pedestrian settings, like Eckhart Tolle's epiphanies, stepping off the bus or something. And I just realized I had a sense that there was a purpose to this life, and it was to know that I was loved. Bone deep. And I experienced the completion of that purpose, to know deeply that I was loved. And I even think about some of the particulars of my childhood and how that knowing was challenged and had to be achieved. In adulthood, I'd fully achieved it. And actually, there was a little internal bit of alarm in that experience about, oh, I guess I'm done with this life. Here comes the heart attack. No, wait, I'm driving a car. I've got young children. I'm really not ready to go now. There's stuff that's still interesting. I had to kind of work on that, but there's really a sense of completion. So that happened, and probably maybe 20-ish years ago-ish. And I will say, when I look inside to your question, there feels in me an urgency of generosity. Like the last 10 years, there's been this urgency to offer what I have. And I step back from that, and there are other parts of me that feel quite Abbott-like in my personality and kind of nature, very peaceful and easy and unattached, seeing the big picture. And also there's a part of me that's quite muscular and engaged and wants to offer it. I've been able to scratch some of the itches left from my childhood of narcissistic injury, so I feel less and less animated by any kind of influential motive to be important or impressive. It's happily, I think, in many moments entirely, most of the time largely fallen away. So what's left is this urgency of generosity that itself does feel slightly unsettled. And I do wonder if there's some animating purpose that's left. You kind of move on to the next thing, that it's good to make the offering. I think I'm working my way to this piece, and I'm in this piece a lot, but still, where we make the offering 100% with our whole heart, while simultaneously, and knowing that it doesn't matter in a sense, or that there are many kinds of offerings. They all sort of get woven together within a generation or two in the river of time. And this feels like there's some kind of developing process there for me about this line from T.S. Eliot I think about a lot. I think it was in his poem where he became really a Christian. He really had, it was this very spiritual poem. And there's a line in it that says, "Teach me to care and not to care." It's equanimity from a Buddhist standpoint, equanimity and compassion together. Teach me to care and not to care. It's just so deep, that line. You could think on that for a long time. Put it on your tombstone, right? So I think it's a long, rambling, and pretty intimate answer to your question.
Yeah.
I have felt internally very powerful, kind of archetypal characters like the woodsman. There's a part of me that is very comfortable with solitude and this vision of living in a little cabin in the woods on the edge of a river in the mountains. And it's a classic art, speaking of Mythopoetic. People come to visit, and I'm a bit of a hermit, and the animals like me, children too. There's a part of that in me. I think also the archetype of often something extremely young and old at the same time. The wise child, that character in science fiction and other things, the wise child is always, or the childlike old person, both of those together. That's very real for me. Combination of playfulness and habit-like wisdom, pretty real. Hey, you must be a therapist.
I just draw this out of people. All joking aside, I appreciate the vulnerability and intimacy. It's happening a lot in these interviews, and I think it is ultimately a real service. Just being absolutely human, and so tender with the folks who are listening, and I really appreciate that. Yeah. So this is a practical question, but it gets sort of to the heart of the matter. So, imagine a person, they've been listening to this series, and they're experiencing a growing understanding, or at least it feels like that, around this whole world of purpose and meaning. And so I guess the question is, so if they're sitting there and going, well, okay, what do I do after this video? Specifically, because there's so many questions, right? There's waking up and being an emotional adult, which are themselves full discussions. But in terms of this question of, well, if this purpose thing is real to a degree, what can I do? How can I skillfully meet this inquiry? What is my place, my gift? How do I discover? Because I think there's a lot of people who go, well, that all sounds great, but I don't know, what the path is. And it wouldn't seem at first glance that the Buddha's path it's more of the Ramana Maharshi, who am I, what am I, at the level of essence. So this question of purpose discovery, is there something you would share about what people can do to connect with that mythopoetic, that purpose place inside of them?
That's a great question. Several things come to mind. One is become more comfortable with authenticity. Right there.
Yeah.
Becoming more just comfortable with being real about who you are. And in the language of Carl Rogers, lining up these three circles, what's really true about you in the moment, like what's the actual readout or state of the body mind in this moment, including what's consciously available, what's really true in your internal world in that moment. Second circle, what are you aware of as what's really true? And then last, what do you express or reveal to people? And that doesn't mean we have to be utterly transparent at all times. It's appropriate to filter things out. But on the whole, can you be comfortable with being authentic? How in the world can you give over to your calling if you're not able to be truly aware of your own depths and comfortable with them? And then that goes to developing assertiveness skills and realizing that fences make for good neighbors, and that being able to and choose your relationships so that it's safe to be authentic with the people around you, and get used to being authentic and be brave enough to be authentic. Brene Brown stuff about the courage to be vulnerable and so forth. So and that's really key. And a lot of people, they're just not comfortable with real-time authenticity. And it's just, for example, the distinction, can you feel it while you say it? Rather than reporting on your own experience like a journalist from a war zone on the other side of the planet. A lot of people read out their internal process, they describe their experience, but they're not feeling it as they say it. For example, that's real-time authenticity. And just get used to it. Practice it. Feel the echoes in your own body as you speak your truth. And sanction yourself, authorize yourself, validate yourself for being able to do that. This is your seat. This is your place. Drawing the metaphor from Buddhism, you touch the ground where you are. You have a right to be here. So that's kind of old school, and it's very real, and there's a lot of work for a lot of people to do about that.
Yeah.
Including in Western cultures that focus a lot on image and selling people and working people, and presentation and so forth. Okay.
Yeah.
1, 2, get comfortable with nonverbal process. There are a lot of ways to do that. One is just really tune into body sensations in your practice, mindfulness of breathing, do things that are around imagery, paint, open to imagistic imagination, disengage from the voice in the back of the head. Get comfortable with nonverbal process. Get more comfortable with that. Another thing I think is important is to get comfortable with the experience of surrender, of being swept along, or in a healthy sense submitting, or being given over to, or not exercising super tight top-down control. Regulation, even neurologically, really happens, to use it sort of loosely, top-down and bottom-up. And both are really important. Some people need more top-down control. They don't have enough impulse control. They have a Ferrari engine and bicycle brakes. They need more top-down regulation. Other people, a lot though, need to lighten up about the internal executive. I use the metaphor of a country with a capital city and then the provinces. For many people, they live entirely inside their capital city, and they have very little sense of the provinces, and they're at war with their provinces. And except over time, the provinces rebel. And so part of the process is to shift the ecology of power in their own internal world out of the capital city into more of the provinces, and allow the provinces to breathe and have more influence. So loosen the tightness of top-down control. Otherwise, again, how can you give over to purpose in practical ways? Another suggestion that's been, all these have been real for me in my own journey, because, you know, I definitely was the opposite of all these when I landed in early adulthood and left home. Another one I think is really important is, and this goes to adult development theory, Daniel Levinson kind of stuff, is to reclaim the dream, reclaim what you knew when you were young. Man, I've been thinking about that lately. How, as children, including 4-year-olds, really young children, you know stuff you can't put in words, but you know stuff. Like for me, one of the major things I knew, and it's really present in all my earliest memories, is this wistful happiness. In my core, there was a disengaged happiness that felt unconditional, and yet also a sorrowfulness, just seeing so much unnecessary unhappiness and bickering and quarreling and tension and stress and aggravation. Kids, parents, adults, my family. And then in me was a real longing. This goes to my own origin myth, my own origin story. A longing to figure out what were the enabling, what were the conditions, what were the causes of true happiness, reliable happiness, deep contentment, deep inner peace, falling back into the arms of love continuously. How to do that, actually. That set me on my way. And so I think I would invite people to look back on their early childhood, or childhood through their teen years, even into early adulthood. What were the longings that really mattered? Sometimes those longings get shelved, and they need to be dusted off and reclaimed, reintegrated, honored, especially at the heart of it. Like, oh, okay, you wanted to be a rock star. Well, what did you want to experience or contribute through being a rock star? Maybe that boat has sailed because you never learned to play guitar. There's that. But yet there's something about playing and participating with people and helping them have a really good time, and along the way dropping in a little wisdom. That is at the heart of being a rock star. That's still available even if you're 75. What could you do? Let's look at that. I think all and more that's really practical. is be willing to do things that are powerfully experiential. I mean, I came up through the human potential movement. I think we probably share a lot of similar experiences. And I just think about the power of certain kinds of experiences in wilderness, physical challenge, ropes courses, vision quest, tapping into the wisdom of people who've been working this process. I don't think you're going to find it very much in cognitive behavioral therapy. You probably would find it in the rainforests in South America. You could find it in first people around the world. Silent meditation retreat, just you and your own mind for 10 days of silence.
Well, that brings me to a question I wanted to ask you as a seasoned meditator, as a meditation teacher. So many people would receive the classical teachings of the Buddha not necessarily as a pathway to answer the question of purpose. So my question is there a relationship? And if so, what is the efficacy of meditation? I mean, there's many wonderful things about it, but specifically, do you see any efficacy in terms of the inquiry? What do I do? How do I allow myself to become, embodied with this fiery purpose? If one is seeking that.
Yeah, I want to speak to that, but I want to finish on the other one because.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, please.
Really quickly, I just want to underline. I just think most people have very predictable pedestrian lives. Most of us, myself, I have. Really, really well upholstered routines. And there's something very powerful, people, to jolt yourself out of that frame. Do something that's, forgive the vernacular, a real kick in the butt. What is that? What might that be? Maybe what it is literally just take a day and go into silence. Don't talk to anybody and do exactly what you want to do today. That's interesting. Or go on a road trip by yourself for 3 days. Or take an intense workshop somewhere with someone. Do something that's a kick in the butt. Go camping. Just something that's out of your normal frame. And then the other thing is that when you have intimations of purpose, when you get the call, really honor it, protect it, and treat it as sacred. Really. And capture the value of it. Like a lot of people have these one-off experiences, and it makes no difference really over the long haul. If anything, it's sort of haunting, and it feels like they've fallen short ever since because they never implemented the vision that came to them. So if you get the call and it feels authentic and real, do things about it. Change your daily schedule as a result. I put up collages. I have images in my space. I look at them and go, yeah, that's who I really want to be. That draws me into being my best self when I look at that collage. So implement it. Make it real. It's hard won. It's so classic. You go on pilgrimage for 6 months. You get the teaching. Remember the teaching. Okay. Meditation. There's a lot of mapping between this topic and meditation. Many kinds of meditations. What are we talking about here? And I think from a Buddhist frame and my understanding of other traditions, there really is a place for the moral dimension as well as the dimension of intention or purpose. As you know, in the Eightfold Path in Buddhism, wise intention, right intention is listed really toward the front end of the list. Typically, it's wise view, wise intention, and it keeps going. So it really sets the frame. So I think there really is a place for recognizing what causes harm and what causes benefits, and being clear on your intentions and also consequences, karmas, effects, causes and effects. Right? So I think that part's incredibly clear. And meditative practice often surfaces that. You wake up in the morning and whatever you did the day before, and you meditate, and your mind is quieting, and you cannot fail but recognize that you're paying a price for staying up too late, watching that extra TV show, having that extra beer, having that third cookie, something, getting into that argument with your partner you didn't need to do, getting obsessed with some political blog at 11:30 at night. You didn't need to do that. So you see the effects when you meditate because your mind is quieting to really see the effects. It's really good. And also I think in meditation, this is where, a lot of what we've talked about so far isn't particularly informed by neuroscience and kind of practical neuropsychology. This part would be a little bit. There's a traditional saying, your mind takes its shape from what it rests upon. Well, based on what we know about the brain, how it's constantly being shifted by our experiences, especially negative ones, and how important it is to help the brain change for the better by sustaining embodied attention to wholesome states of being that we want to help ourselves increasingly establish ourselves in. We want to help those wholesome states of being increasingly establish themselves in us. States like compassion, loving kindness, insight, purpose, calling, being increasingly given over to calling, your calling, courage, grit, commitment to social justice, you name it. Insight, subtleties of real-time clarity about impermanence, subtleties of real-time clarity about the emptiness of all phenomenology. You want to help that stabilize? Well, the way to do it is to really rest your attention on that. So when I meditate, a lot of the way I meditate is essentially I'm trying to help myself rest my attention on what is calling my heart. Rest your mind on what calls your heart, to help it stabilize and live its way into being, including in a very physical and embodied way, woven into the fabric of your body, especially the nervous system, hardwired, in a sense, into yourself. And so if purpose is something people are wanting to help become increasingly comfortably identified with and lived by, so they don't have to dualistically remember their New Year's resolutions and recommit every morning to them, but becomes increasingly automatic. There's this movement in learning from deliberate to automatic. You want to help it move to automatic if it's good. So through repeatedly resting them, experiences, and I've written a lot about this, as you know, and there's a lot of freely offered material on my website and so forth about how to actually steepen your growth curve, your cultivation curve, bhavana curve. Neuro bhavana, in many ways, is what I do for a living. Cultivation, bhavana in Sanskrit, Pali too, I think. Anyway, to do that, it really helps to just marinate in the experience. So I think meditation is really helpful in that way. I will say that I don't know if you know the structure of levels of consciousness from Adi Da, or Godfrey John Levinanda. He talks about these levels. You share that. Okay. So I'll just kind of do them quickly for people. Yep. It's for me a very useful way to organize different practices and where are we and what am I trying to do. So he related it to the chakras, but you don't need to relate it to that essentially. So the first, I think 3 levels are pretty much survival levels. You know, ordinary life levels, right? We have raw survival. We have relationship. Then we have sort of like functionality. Around here we start to shift into, then you start moving into different kinds of spiritual practice. More heart-oriented bhakti style devotional practice. Then we have more of the mystical style of practice. And then we have what he calls 6-stage practice, where he located a lot of Buddhism there, where it's like you just get the emptiness of all phenomena and the common nature of all phenomena. And it's a very deconstructive approach. It's an emptying out in many, many ways. I think if I were thinking of it in terms of Christian mystical practices, it's a term come to me. It's like something and something anyway. So you're an emptying out. And then there's 7th stage where you're really lived by the ultimate, the divine. So for me, this consideration from purpose still edges into my own deep interest in that 6th, 7th stage territory, where it's very, I think people have their nature, like my wife's much more kind of devotional type than I am. I'm less that way. I'm more of a wisdom type, and I go to the deconstructive, just pixelation of reality in lived by the transcendental, lived by the unconditioned. That's kind of where I rapidly go. And so there's a little part of me that's just a little careful about not getting too caught up in identification with purpose, or with some notion that there's an essence inside that could be attached to. That said, everything I've said about purpose is real for me in my own practice, and I think it's really helpful for people.
Yeah. Great.
That wasn't too much divergence there.
No. So we're coming up towards the end of our time. There's a little thing that I've been doing. Well, it's not a little thing. It's a big thing, which is I jokingly call it the lightning round. So here's what it is, and you can tell me if you want to play. I have described purpose as like a white light coming through a prism, and that there are 8 facets. It could be 10 or 4, but I made it 8. And so what I do is I ask people kind of a free association, in a sense, just a word or two, an image or a sentence. And you can also say pass if the question doesn't resonate, if it's not alive for you. So if you're willing to try, I'd start pitching. Okay. The vision and the task. So like the vision of my purpose is bringing more goodness, truth, and beauty into the world. I hope in 30,000 years, great things happen. My task, one of them right now, is creating Purpose Guides Institute. So for you, what's the vision, the 20,000-foot perspective? And what's one of the tasks that you are working on now that brings that a step closer to fruition? So vision and task.
The vision is 1 billion brains in the green zone, in which there is, and defined as, a core sense of basic needs met for safety, satisfaction, and connection, so that there's no embodied basis for hatred and fear, greed, frustration, and hurt, inadequacy, resentment, aggression, or conflict. So 1 billion brains in the green zone, which would change the course of human history. So I tend to think of these things in terms of, through the frame of us as a species and what went wrong when agriculture came in 10,000 years ago, and inequalities of various kinds just went crazy. They went from the kind of shallow inequality you see in hunter-gatherer bands today and historically, to the kind of extremes of inequality of wealth and power that we've seen for the last 10,000 years, including in so-called democracies. So that would be my vision. I'd love to see that. And it's a realistic vision at this point, while also being very challenging. And my contribution to it, I think a lot is to honestly describe it and define it and ground it in Western science and neuropsychology, so that people get this is real, not a crazy utopian vision, and really teach people how to turn the fact of objective safety. There's a sufficiency of safety, satisfaction, and connection for probably 80% of the people living in the world, at least. I think there clearly are people in war zones who are starving. They don't have the actual objective basis to experience a sufficiency of safety, satisfaction, and connection, so that they could rest in peace, contentment, and love in terms of those 3 needs. But 80% of the world does, including probably 90%, 98% in the developed countries of the world. And yet, what fraction of the people living in those developed countries, or even sufficiently developed, that there really is a basis, actually live in the green zone most minutes of most days? A much tinier fraction. And so why is that? It's a lost opportunity. And I think a lot of it is people don't internalize. They don't take in experiences of sufficiency of needs met, and they miss opportunities to literally install a green zone resting state in their own body mind, in their own physiology, in their own nervous system, in their own cardiovascular, gastrointestinal system, and so forth. They just don't do it. And so I have developed a lot of technology, as you know, around taking in the good, the heal process, hardwiring happiness, installation, and I'm going to continue to offer that.
Yeah, beautiful. Actually, you moved into one of the other questions. You already answered it, which is, what is your giveaway or your unique transformational process? What is the actual activity you do in a variety of different delivery sort of systems? You just touched on that, so I won't
I'd
ask
say
you.
I'm extremely interested in learning and growth. Broadly defined,
Yeah,
that's great to learn a new fact, but I mean emotional learning, body learning.
yeah,
And I think of the importance of growing resources to deal with our challenges and vulnerabilities. So how do you grow resources, particularly inside your own mind, grounded in your body? Because you take that with you wherever you go. How do you grow resources? So now resources are important. Then the question becomes, how do you grow them? So the what of resources are things like compassion, resilience, happiness, love. Those are resources. The how is, how do you grow them? Well, you grow them by experiencing them and then turning those experiences into lasting changes in your body, especially inside your brain. That's learning, that's growth, that's cultivation. In effect, we're trying to develop the superpowers of various resources, and learning is the superpower of superpowers. It's the one that gives you the rest, and it's the one you can apply to any form of learning, including healing from your past. So it's highly leveraged. It's, in a sense, fancy term, it's a heuristic. It's bootstrapping. It's
yeah.
midwifing. You used that word about yourself early on. Learning is the midwife of the development of the resources that we want for ourselves and we want for others. We want to help others acquire them, and through acquiring them ourselves, we have more to offer to others. So I would say I'm extremely interested
Yeah.
in learning about learning and helping
Woo!
people.
I want to stand up and cheer. I love that answer. I'm not going to ask you all the questions. We don't have time. So I'm going to ask you this final question. It's originally it was going to be a B-reel for this series, and it was going to be a gift to my son. So here's the setup. I have an 8-year-old. His name is Yi, Y-I. And we adopted him when he was 10 months old. He's 8 now. And on his 18th birthday, I'm going to be giving him a gift. And what I've been doing is I've been asking the different teachers in this summit to speak to him on his 18th birthday, just for a minute or two or whatever you want. And you can say something to the effect, if you want to, do this, which would be, hi, Yi, I'm a friend or colleague of your father's. And on your 18th birthday, if you are feeling this question alive in you, what is my purpose? Here is my advice, my 2 cents of how, if you're asking, how do I discover my purpose? You're 18, you're going, I don't have no idea. Here's what I want to offer. So if you want to offer him that gift, and on the viewers too, I think I'll probably leave it on here for everybody.
So, hi, Yi. My name is Rick Hanson. I'm a friend of your dad's. We were talking September 21st, 2017. And first off, I want to say your dad's awesome just to come up with this idea. I'll keep it short. I think a little bit about what I would want to have said to myself on my 18th birthday, because I don't know you, Yi, as a person. I have a sense of you through your father, but I don't know you as a person. I don't want to presume. If I were to say a couple of things here, it would be first and foremost to recognize the real power of lots of little things that add up over time, for good or bad. And don't underestimate the power of lots of little bad things, little stresses, little conflicts, little forms of toxifying your own body. Think about the impact of that over time. The flip of it is to think about all those little moments throughout your day, all those little experiences or all those opportunities for little actions in the flow of your day that will really build up to something big over time. And that's great and hopeful because it gives you something you can actually do. Big things are hard to do. Little things, we can do a lot of little things every day. And so it's hopeful, but it also goes to responsibility because no one but you will be the primary architect of your own life. No one but you will be the primary screenwriter and director and leading man, I guess, for your own life. And so it's a responsibility to take. And the last thing I would just offer is have fun. Fun is so underrated. Have a good time. Be playful. Technically, when we're in a playful state, that tends to release various neurotrophic factors that really helps us learn and grow from the experiences we're having. So if you want to gain from your experiences, be playful in some ways that are authentic. Sometimes play is fairly quiet, but it's still playfulness, a quality of delight sometimes internally. Anyway, be playful about it. And then really last, don't let the yahoos get you down. There are a lot of people who think that you got to live life inside this little box or inside these little lines. Nah, they just made it up. You think about all the ways there are to be a human being throughout history, good ways. It's the full opportunity for you, the full park for you of life to be, and claim an internal autonomy and freedom and right to be you. And then last, man, there's a line, Mary Oliver, what will you do with your one wild and precious life? And who knows what came before, who knows what will come after. But the thing we know for sure is we only get one life as this body, as this personality. And man, oh man, grab it, do it, go for it. It's the one you got. That's it.
Oh, what a beautiful place to end. Thank you for your generosity to my son, to our audience, and taking this time out of your incredibly busy schedule to do this interview, Rick.
My pleasure. Thank you, Jonathan. You really pulled it out of me. This was fantastic and personally valuable. And I hope it's helpful to people listening or watching. I'm
pretty certain it is. Is there, if people, so I mentioned some of the books that you've written, and I recommend people go to Amazon. Is there a website or something that you can offer if people want to pursue learning with you?
Just my name, Rick Hanson, S-O-N, Rick Hanson.
Okay.
.net. They can search on it. It's easy. Just my website. It's a great portal into lots and lots of offerings. It gets updated fairly often with new offerings, new material from just the latest blogs coming out, as well as neat material from other people that we post. And also I've got a book coming out in the spring of 2018. We're coming around the bend here. So just Rick Hanson, SON.net.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everybody for your attention and your listening. And please check out some of the other wonderful interviews we have from Jashanti and Gene Houston and so forth. And wishing you all a good day. Bye-bye.